This presentation is intended for parents of students at REES Elementary School. It provides an overview and major highlights from a face-to-face parent math night conducted on January 28, 2015. We addressed how you can help your child with mathematics, as well as provided an overview about mathematics standards. My name is Kathy Carpenter, and I served as the facilitator for that meeting. If you have any questions about the content in this workshop, please email me at the address on the screen. If you have questions about specific mathematics assignments your child has been learning, those would be questions that would be addressed by your child's teacher or the other school staff. So I'm going to give you a highlight version of what we did in the hour-and-a-half meeting. So the first thing to think about as we think about mathematics standards and strategies is to have you think about for a few minutes, what does it mean to think mathematically? And those parents who came to the meeting, we spent a few minutes asking them to use exactly 6 words and write an essay that addresses what it means to think mathematically. So if you'd like to take a few minutes and do that, you can hit pause on this presentation and then return to the slides, because at the end of the presentation you'll return to your essay to see how your thoughts have changed based on what you've learned. So in order to think about how mathematics in elementary school is changing, I want you to consider how it should be changing at high school. And we're going to do that by looking at a short 10-minute video about a teacher and how he implements what he calls patient problem solving in his high school mathematics classrooms. So if you take a few minutes, the video is about 10 minutes long, click on the link or copy and paste this link into your browser and watch the video by a gentleman named Dan Meyer about how math class needs a makeover. And as you're watching the video, I'd like you to think about what can we do as a school community to foster mathematical thinking, because it's not just about the teachers doing things different in class, but also as parents and as students thinking very, very deeply about mathematical ideas. So take a few minutes, watch the video, and then come back. So the purpose of the video was to give you an idea about what mathematics can look like in high school and be very rich and engaging using new technology and new strategies. But I'd also like for you to think about what is it that we do in elementary to build the foundation for that. And part of that is to have good standards of what content and practices students have to learn. So I'd like to give you a brief history about what has happened with Georgia's mathematics program over the years. In 1986, the state of Georgia worked to create the Quality Core Curriculum. That was a list of objectives, and that was not just in mathematics, but of course today's presentation is going to focus on mathematics. And what happened was this was really just a list of items that were to be taught at each grade. They weren't necessarily rigorous, they weren't necessarily connected, and some of the lists got rather lengthy. And some folks calculated that in order to teach all of the objectives, you would have to basically only teach mathematics all year to get through all of that. So that kind of worked for some students, but not for many of them. And we waited almost 20 years before we revised the curriculum and came up with the Georgia Performance Standards. Those GPS standards were based on taking a look at high-performing states as well as high-performing countries and how they laid out the mathematics the students were to learn. Those were much more rigorous than the QCC, but unfortunately most states had done work between 1986 and the 2000s in upgrading their standards. So at that point, Georgia was pretty far behind as a state. Some districts had done some things on their own to make sure their program was rich, but as a state, we weren't having policies that really made sure that all students were learning rich mathematics. So the GPS standards were a great stretch for many of our children. Fast forward 7 more years to the point when in 2012 Georgia adopted what are called the Common Core Georgia Performance Standards, and that marked the beginning of Georgia's partnership in the Common Core State Standards Initiative, which was an effort of the governors of the participating states, of which there were almost 4 dozen. These governors got together to try to create a common set of standards. And so that was an effort to make it very clear what children were learning so that we had consistency across states and could make some comparisons. Unfortunately, this also hit at a time where the politics of education and policy got tied up into kind of a federal government conspiracy theory that the federal government was involved in this, and that actually is not true at all. Currently, the state of Georgia has undergone a revision of the Common Core, and on January 15th, 2015, they actually adopted a revised set of Common Core standards that were to help make things a little more clear about what the expectations are for students. So we're in the middle of this standards upgrade, and that is part of the reason that we're having these kinds of presentations to help bring parents up to date. The next two slides provide you with some overview content about what the Common Core is like. I'm not going to read them to you. I'll pause. You can pause the presentation and read through them. I'll pause for a few seconds on each slide so that you can get a sense about what the big picture idea is. This slide gives you an overview that of how the Common Core is arranged, not just for standards for content, but also that there are these standards for mathematical practice. And at the end of the presentation, you'll see specifically what those are. This slide gives you an idea about what the major topics are in each grade span that children will be learning. So overall, as you start to look at the standards and teachers have started implementing standards, we have these major shifts that are happening. We've shifted in focus from just having a laundry list of standards to having concentrated areas that move in and out of the curriculum and come alive using the mathematical practices. We have more coherence in the Common Core standards. Rather than topics just being disjointed, they're connected within grade levels and from grade levels, but up and down the grade levels. And then these bottom three all fall under this header of rigor, academic rigor. And so we're asking students to apply mathematics rather than waiting for the mathematics application to come at the end. It serves as a launching point. We're going to ask students to understand mathematics at a conceptual level, and we're also going to then couple that with then developing the procedural skill and fluency that we need in order for children to be successful. So what you see here on this shift slide is kind of a summary of the changes that happened from K to 12. And so as your child's working through their math program, if you have older children, you probably have seen a major shift in the kind of thinking they're asked to do. So I wanted to give you an example of a specific standard and talk about it a little bit, and talk about maybe how teachers go about teaching it. So this is an exact standard from second grade under the guise of operations and algebraic thinking, and students are being asked to add and subtract within 20. Not only that, but they're asking students to fluently add and subtract within 20 using mental strategies. So they've learned some strategies actually in first grade that then the second grade teachers will be using to help them become better with mental mathematics. And then at the end of this slide, you see that there is a specific fluency standard. By the end of grade 2, know from memory all sums of two one-digit numbers. So that by the end of second grade, your child can add all of the single-digit numbers pretty much with automatic response. They don't have to think about those answers. But teachers are doing a lot in the course of the school year to develop that understanding, and I want to talk about that for a few minutes. So we have this idea about mathematical fluency. And in the past, being fluent in mathematics has become has given a pretty narrow view of it. Children think that being fluent in mathematics means that you're just really fast at your basic facts. And while that is one component, speed is only one component. I'd like to think about fluency in its biggest sense, that in the similar way that we develop language fluency. I am fluent in English not because I talk really fast. I'm fluent in English because I know how language connects. I know how to retrieve the language I want when I need it. And when I don't know what I want to say, I might be able to use other language to get to what I was actually trying to say more concisely. So I'd like for you to think about mathematical ideas in that way. So specifically though, with respect to basic facts though, there are some ways you can develop fluency and make it not be such a high stress area, as well as something that children hate. So the first thing you can do, and there's nothing wrong with good old-fashioned flashcards, the first thing you can do is just have your child take a pile of flashcards that they're being asked to memorize and have them sort them by level of difficulty. So an easy pile, a medium pile, and a hard pile. And so the goal each week is for children to only practice the easy pile once a week, because those are the ones they already know. And children have a tendency to actually practice the things they need to practice the least. So we want to focus on those medium and hard piles. We want them to move 2 cards, 2 facts, if you will, from medium to easy each week, and 1 fact from hard to medium. That way they're gradually getting better at their facts. They're practicing the medium and the hard piles more. They're thinking about strategies. If they really struggle with some of the hard facts, they might think about close facts that help them get to that hard fact, and so on and so forth. Some teachers will use time tests to figure out how fluent children are in their number sense. I would advocate using reverse time test rather than saying you have 3 minutes to do this page of math. Give the child a half sheet of math, and there's something psychologically good about only doing a half sheet rather than a full sheet. Give them a half sheet and see how long it takes them to do it. Then a week later, give them that same half sheet, see if it takes them less time, so that the child is getting the practice they need, but also it's their own personal goal to beat themselves each time. Another thing you can do with your child's homework if they're struggling is just have them use 1 color of a pencil for a period of time. If it's a fluency practice, it can just be purple for 1 minute, then finish the assignment with green. If they're doing a regular homework assignment and they're taking a long time, put the timer on. Don't tell them. Say use the purple pen for the first part of this assignment. When the timer dings, you're going to use the green pencil. That way you can see how long they're taking to do their homework, as well as how consistent they are in their work ethic. And then you can use these match games. So if you go to Amazon, you can find these tiles, these pressed cardboard tile called match games, and those can contain basic facts that you use like a memory game. And so children then practice their facts by matching them with other facts that have the same solution. The important thing to realize about fluency is that it is something that develops over the course of a year. So you want to set gradual goals for your child and not expect them just to develop this fluency overnight. This slide is intended to provide you with a sense of how fluency is rolled out in the Common Core. So we start in kindergarten and we're just asking children to add and subtract within 5, all the numbers that they can do on one hand. And we move up the scale both in terms of numbers as well as then knowing things from memory. And so what you see there is a gradual development over the grade levels. The standard column there, the column that says standard, is just a code that tells the teachers where they can find that standard. OA means operations and algebraic thinking. A means it's the first set of standards, and number 5 means it's statement number 5. So that's just a code in order to help you see that these actually do come from the standards, and they do have expected fluencies at every grade level. There are also fluency requirements for grade 4 and 5. I'm not listing them in this presentation just for brevity, but those are available as well if you're interested in those. So then I want to give some time, and this will be a truncated version of what we did at the face-to-face meeting, to kind of talk about these standards and show you them in action. So this is a sample 2nd grade standard, and I chose this standard not just because it's a foundational standard, but also it's one that's very different from maybe a standard that teachers have had before. So take a minute and read that standard and pay particular attention to the part in red. So this standard serves as a foundation for fractions and also for the language of fractions and naming fractions and what fractions mean. But the part in red is the part that many teachers and many children have not experienced before. So I want to share with you a set of puzzles that can help with that. And this will show you kind of how teachers might go about building the foundation for these children. So the first thing we might do is give them a set of circle puzzles. We would give them these pieces just randomly, or in a baggie, and the children are asked to recreate the circle on the top left. And then we have a discussion about what it means to be a fair share. Because children have had experience in kindergarten and first grade with sharing, and we have to talk about, when we talk about fractions, that fair shares are ones where all pieces are the same, not just a couple pieces, or not just because I want more and it's fair for me to give you less because I'm thinking in that way. So it's starting to develop that idea, that conceptual notion about fairness in fractions. And if children have trouble with the circle puzzles, the teacher then knows that they have to really provide some support in helping them understand fairness before we can move on to the actual standard. So the second set of puzzles is square puzzles, and their goal is to take the pieces that are shown and create the square at the top left. So the children get to see that, oh wow, I have fractions in puzzle pieces that I name as half because they're the same and it takes two of them to make the whole, but they might not look the same. Remember, the standard is recognize that equal parts may not be identical. So we're starting to build that foundation. And then if we think about rigorous mathematics and really getting students to think deeply about what they're learning, then we move on to this next set of puzzles, where it's rectangle puzzles, and they are all cut into fourths. But as you can see, the fourths look very, very different. And so the students are asked to really defend their answers. How did you know it was a fourth? Especially the one on the bottom right, which clearly we have two parts that look the same and two parts that look the same, but definitely all four parts don't look the same. Whereas in the other puzzles they do, and we can stack them on top of each other and prove that they're the same pieces and parts. But the rigor comes in when we have the children understand that a fourth in one of the puzzles looks like a fourth and is a fourth, and so are the fourths in the other puzzles. And so these puzzles are actually all interchangeable as well. And so you can have some really rich, deep discussions about mathematics. And if children leave second grade and they have a hole in their understanding with respect to the standard, it actually can cause some real trouble with the higher grade levels. So along with this then, with the new standards and with the implementation of having students think more deeply about mathematics, then how they're assessed will change. So the tests that they take will change. What you'll see, and this is true on state testing starting this year, children will take open-ended items on their math test. And remember when I said that part about Georgia being behind on standards? Well, they're also behind on state testing because many states have been doing open-ended items and writing on math tests for a dozen to 15 years. And so we have this catch-up because children who have come through Georgia schools at the state level have only taken multiple choice tests. And so that's going to be a big shift for some of them. Teachers have been working diligently to give them samples and help them understand how to respond. But also, they're going to do this in a gradual way. So there's only going to be a handful of open-ended items this year, and they'll gradually move up the percentage of items on each test that are open. And children will have to write. Now, one question that always comes up is, will they be scored on grammar and spelling? They will not on the mathematics test. Children will be given the benefit of the doubt as long as the word is decipherable. You know, if we can figure out that they're saying the word triangle and they might be missing a letter or two. So we don't want children to get, now we of course want them to use correct grammar and spelling and conventions as much as we can, but if they mess up that part, it's not going to as significantly impact as if it were the language arts test, for instance. The other thing that will be assessed then are these standards for mathematical practice. So children are going to be assessed not only on the math, can they do the mathematics, but can they think deeply about the mathematics. Now, a couple side items that people have asked questions about is how these items are going to be scored. They will be hand scored. And so what that means is that the testing company will hire folks, usually these are classroom teachers or retired classroom teachers or people taking a hiatus from teaching, and they will train them how to score the item. The state of Georgia, as it stands right now, is going to hire folks to score one item. So they will learn how to score that item, and they will only score that one item many dozens, hundreds of times. And they will have some process checks in there to help with the inter-rater reliability. You know, am I scoring the same item the same way? Am I scoring the same paper the same way? They'll sprinkle in some papers. They'll do some blind scoring. They'll give the same item to multiple people to have some safeguards to ensure that the scoring process is fair. So please rest assured that the scoring process is going to follow some very strict protocols. So as you can think about this, it is going to take more time to score this, as well as the first year they have to set some benchmarks for what it means to, have an acceptable score, meet the standard, if you will. And so that's one of the reasons you will not have test scores in 2015 until the fall for your children. So the school will be working with some other, assessments for placement and for intervention with your child in the meantime. That being said, this testing year is called a hold harmless year, which means that children will not be penalized for failing the test. Their promotion or retention will not be based on their performance on this assessment. So that gives you a little bit of background there about where testing is right now. Also, along with that is some of the testing will be online, and I'll show you at the end a website that might help with that. All right, so we talked about the standards for mathematical practice being assessed. So actually, what are these things? So this slide gives you, word for word from the standards, what these standards for mathematical practice are. Take a couple minutes and read through it. So as you can see, this is really about the how we do mathematics, about the thinking about mathematics, and what teachers do is they make this into, grade level appropriate activities. So for instance, attending to precision in 2nd grade looks very different than attending to precision in 8th grade. And so what's different though here is when your child learns the mathematics, it's not just going to be about getting an answer. It's going to be about how they got that answer, how they might critique someone else's reasoning, how they might use certain tools, how they might look for patterns in their thinking and in others' thinking. So these standards help put the meat on the bones, if you will, of learning the mathematics and give it a richness, and it gives it a purpose behind the learning. So we're not just learning math for the sake of learning math. We're learning math for the sake of solving problems, for the sake of reasoning, for the sake of modeling, for the sake of pattern identification. So there are several things then that you can do as a parent to help your child. And this workshop was just intended to give you an overview. I will give you some websites specifically that are very kid-friendly that you can work with them on. But I would encourage your child to talk about mathematics in a very informal setting. Value their mistakes, because oftentimes kids make mistakes because they're developing their reasoning, and it's not just a random mistake. Emphasize that thinking deeply is more important than speed, especially at the elementary level. It's not about how fast you can get the answer. It's about how deeply are you thinking, and the efficiency and the speed will come with that as they have more experience thinking. Again, you can email me with questions, and I also encourage you to read the standards. Georgia has done some minor modifications to the Common Core, as I mentioned before, but if you go to this website, corestandards.org, you'll see the original set of Common Core standards. You can read them by grade level. You can also read the language arts one as well if you're interested. They're relatively friendly language, and it'll give you a sense of what the expectations are at each grade level. So as you think about working with your child then as well, please don't overlook the importance of math toys. Have playing cards for them to play with, have dice, string, yarn, dominoes, shape puzzles, anything to get them doing what I call covert mathematics, where they aren't really sitting down and doing a math worksheet, they're emphasizing the thinking. As you think about the summer coming up, and as well as school breaks, you can have some of these websites in your back pocket, and these are the ones I have found most useful over the years to foster thinking in an online setting.